I was standing where my porch used to be when the bulldozer coughed and fell quiet, cedar and diesel hanging in the air, a cracked photo of my late wife winking up from the dirt like it was asking what just happened. The woman who ordered it, Caroline Pike, HOA president and self-appointed queen of Maple Hollow, had warned me the day before with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Pay a special assessment I'd never heard of by 5 p.m., or remediation will commence. Yeah, that happened. My name is Evan Cole. I'm 52, a veteran. A dad, not the loud type, but in that moment, I felt something colder than anger settle in my chest. The kind of still you get on a frozen lake before sunrise. Because that cabin wasn't just boards and nails. It was where I put myself back together after the service, where my daughter Lily learned to cast, and after her illness found her breath again, watching fog lift off the water. You know what I mean. I keep my bills like I keep my tools lined up labeled, balanced down to the dime. So when Caroline tapped her clipboard and said I was delinquent on an emergency reservoir, dredging fee, I laid my canceled checks on her desk and asked to see the receipts, the contractor licenses, anything real. And she didn't even look down, just steepled her fingers like a TV judge and said, "Those are regular dues. You should read the newsletter. Rules are rules." That night, she went live on Facebook with a flag and a fern behind her, telling the neighborhood they had taken decisive action to protect property values. Used my name, just called me a property in violation, and people clapped in the comments because clapping is easier than asking questions. The next morning, I drove to the far end of the reservoir, where the old spillway sits under cottonwoods. Checked the solar panel. The battery, the float switch I helped wire 18 years ago, and the water level was perfect. No emergency. No dredging first crack in the story. Then Beverly. Her lemon-faced second-in-command gave me 2 hours with 5 boxes of paper and a rule. No photos, no copies, as if a mess could scare me. But I spent years tracing faults through a mile of aircraft cabling. And this looked like a treasure map. Landscaping invoices from a company that doesn't exist. A pool pump repair for a pool we don't have. And then the big one. Clearwater Services LLC, $78,900 for emergency dredging pixelated logo. No license or tax ID, and a lazy signature that looked familiar. So I traced it and held it up next to an earlier mailbox contract signed by Caroline, and it matched same slant, same flourish, same person approving and getting paid, on the same page. And the quiet inside me hardened into a plan. That night in my garage, I stared at the plat map of Maple Hollow. Pale green, lots deep blue water, and a faint dotted line separating them, like a whisper. And the whisper said, the reservoir isn't inside the HOA at all. It's a separate parcel, maybe orphaned, maybe owned by nobody. The way bad paperwork sometimes leaves a thing floating. And that was the moment the story flipped from grief to tactics. I called my buddy from the service, Rico, a guy who can find you a tow truck in a blizzard and a surgeon at 2 a.m. and over eggs. At a diner that smells like bacon and coffee, he said. You have an angle now. Make it a plan. So we took it to a real estate attorney named Dana, who has kind eyes and a mean streak for bullies. And she read in silence, then tapped the paper and said, the developer carved the reservoir out as a future marina. The company went bankrupt. The holding entity dissolved. It's an orphan parcel. The state will entertain a petition to claim it as abandoned, if we file correctly. But we do it quiet if the HOA hears. They'll stampede the courthouse and drag you through the mud for years. It'll be expensive, and you will be the villain in every group chat. I went home and filmed the spillway like a cooking show, explaining the float switch and overflow channel in plain English, scanned the fake invoice, circled every tell, printed the signature comparison, then called Lily to tell her I was using my savings. And she said to Dad, "You don't have to die on every hill anymore. It's a cabin we can build again." And I told her it wasn't just a building, and she said it sounded a lot like revenge, and we didn't talk for a week, which hurt more than I'll admit. I took a shot at the association meeting, walked in with a manila folder, and 30 years of neighbors, suddenly fascinated by their shoes, asked for new business. Laid out the fake invoice, the non-existent contractor, the working spillway, the signature match, and a man stood up and said, "Seems like you're just angry. Like being angry makes you wrong. By default." And Caroline smiled sadly and said, "Misinformation spreads faster than truth." And the room nodded. And I walked out into the parking lot with that heavy quiet. Pressing down, sat in my truck until the world blurred. And then my phone rang, Rico saying, "Hold the line, you're fighting a campaign, not a bar fight. The thing that matters is in motion, don't blink." 3 weeks later, Dana sent a scanned deed, Varsalim. MHB Maple Hollow Reservoir, recorded and stamped mine. And holding that warm paper felt like someone grabbing your arm when you're slipping, Tuan. Saturday morning, I drove to the HOA's refurbished boat ramp with a post driver and a heavy chain hung signs that said, "Private property. Access by permit." Only wrapped the gate with links as thick as my wrist, then walked the perimeter and posted every access point. And by noon, the association phones must have sounded like a bingo hall, while mine stayed still. That evening was the Maple Hollow Summer Social Hot Dogs Ice Chest Chardonnay speeches on the patio 12 feet above the water. So Rico set a tripod on my old lot, pointed the camera at me with the sunset behind my shoulder. And at 7:30, we went live on the same page Caroline uses to play. "Mayor, good evening. Neighbors, my name is Evan Cole. Some of you know me as the guy whose cabin used to be right here tonight. I've got 3 simple truths." And I held up the invoice. "Won this bill for emergency. Dredging is counterfeit. No license number, pixelated logo. And this signature belongs to the person who approved it. Not an allegation that's handwriting." And I let that rest while the patio went quiet and heads bowed to phones. Then to the HOA never owned this reservoir. Not in the 70s. Not last summer. They managed the docks because everyone assumed the water was theirs. It isn't. And then 3. As of 3 weeks ago, Maple Hollow Reservoir is private property owned by Maple Hollow Water LLC. That is me, and starting now, no person or entity, including the board, may access the water docks or launch without written permission. A phone clattered on concrete. Mr. Lane pointed at Caroline like she'd stolen his wallet, and Caroline herself turned pale, clutching a folder, marching down the steps, with her finger jabbing the air, shouting slander and covenants and common area, and you're trespassing. And I looked at the camera, then back at her, and said, "Are those documents more or less real than the Clearwater invoice?" And she froze like a bluff, getting called on a river card. A deputy arrived 20 minutes later. Tired eyes, good ears, looked over her papers, and my deed returned from his cruiser, and said in a grocery list voice, "Ma'am, your document does not grant ownership of the reservoir to the association. The recorded deed lists Maple Hollow Water LLC as the current owner. You are not authorized to remove that lock or access this property. And when she reached for the chain with bolt cutters, the handcuffs clicked soft trespass. Vandalism forgery to follow when someone finally compared signatures like I did on day one. And by Monday, the board resigned with words like transition and gratitude, and none like accountability. Here's the part I didn't expect. The neighborhood got quiet. Then people started showing up with casseroles and nail guns. A retired carpenter named Teresa took over, framing like a foreman with a heart of gold. Rico ran crews like an operation. The wives turned the lot into a picnic with drills. And under the new foundation, we buried a handful of old fragments. A scorched doorknob. A shard of mug letting the past rest. Then we held a meeting in my yard instead of that patio. No dais, just folding chairs in a circle, voted for an independent audit term. Limits, plain English financials. A restitution fund that cut its first check to someone steamrolled by petty fines. And when it came to the water, I said, I didn't buy it to be the new tyrant. I bought it to pull the plug on a lie. I'll lease the reservoir to the Reformed Association for $1 a year. Under 2 conditions: full community votes on water decisions, and a new name. Not a developer's brochure, something that means something. And we picked Lily's Cove unanimous. My daughter squeezing my hand, whispering, I'm sorry, and me saying me too. We finished the cabin before the leaves turned nothing fancy, just heart and good light. A cedar porch facing the cove, and a nail where Lily hangs her lucky hat. And we hosted the first Lily's Cove community fishing day. Yes, who used to get shushed, ran free. Dads told bad jokes. The woman who once wrote me up for a garden hose brought brownies and asked if she could sit a while, and I watched the water take the light and give it back softer, and thought justice isn't gavels, and seals it's putting back what fear broke. Would I do it again? Spend my savings. Be the villain until the thread flipped. Hold the line when everyone stared at their shoes, yes. 100 times, yes. But you tell me, was buying the water the right move, or did I go too far? HOAs protect neighborhoods or just protect power? Drop your city and your take in the comments. And if you believe nobody is above the rules they write for others, hit subscribe and share this with someone who needs to hear it.